Ian Seymour has not one but two Emmy nominations for his work on the Netflix series Tiger King. I'm Tony Ruiz of Gold Derby, and Ian, for people who don't maybe know the difference, because you have a nomination for sound mixing and for sound editing. Can you explain the difference for people that maybe don't know the difference?
Yeah, sure. So, for Tiger King specifically, we, for each episode, we would have a week of edit prep time and then a week of mix time. And so the main difference is that in the editorial period, we're sort of compiling sound effects, adding sound effects, and cleaning up dialogue, the production dialogue, the archival dialogue, any of those sort of news clips that you saw on Tiger King, and doing that sort of nitty gritty cleanup work ahead of time. And then in the mix, we are balancing all the elements together and kind of shaping everything into the largest format that it will be heard in. So in the mix, we are balancing dialogue, music, and sound effects together, deciding who takes a front seat at, what point of the episode, but also taking all of those sounds and spreading them into, for Tiger King, we mixed in Dolby Atmos. So we would spread them into an Atmos space using all the speakers around us and kind of taking creative liberties with that.
It's so interesting too, because when you think of sound just in general, I think a lot of people assume like big studio movies and
Yeah.
The big kind of Marvel entertainments. They don't necessarily think of them for like a documentary or a docuseries.
Yeah.
So what is the challenge that is unique to doing sound for a docuseries versus like a regular narrative feature?
Yeah, well, for a docuseries, at least what I've found, especially for Tiger King, there's so much footage that was captured over many different years, right? Like over a very long time period. So we were getting sort of a variety of, recording qualities, like a variety of footage. Some of it was like different frame rates and kind of had to be like played around with to make it look in sync and correct. There's a lot more just like moving parts. It's not like a crew signed on day one. They said these are our specs, and sort of everything stays the same throughout post-production. Obviously that's an oversimplification, but with a docuseries, there's so many more moving parts of like, just different types of footage, stuff that came from many years ago, right next to something that came from like, that was shot a month or two ago. And so it's kind of just a little more of I think a technical, jumping through hoops to handle that type of stuff. But the cool thing I find is that, with the docuseries category, I think historically, a lot of this stuff would be played straight, as I would call it. You would have interview dialogue and music, and then like some B-roll type background footage that sort of plays throughout. And there's sort of a formula to make that sound right in the mix. But for Tiger King and for a lot of docuseries that I'm seeing recently, it's turned into more of a creative mix, a creative sound mix where, the B-roll stuff that we put in really had like some texture and grit to it. We wanted to hear people moving around. We wanted to hear like the zoo or the footage of, a court case happening in the background. And so it wasn't just this sort of formula of like, we hear the story and we have some music that plays along with it. It's like, it was definitely more of a, there were more opportunities that I was given and my team was given to, make creative choices and sort of use a full Dolby Atmos space to do the mixing. And we actually found some great moments to do stuff like that. There's a scene when the Joe Exotic character is sort of flying a helicopter over Carol Baskin's zoo, and it was just this like beautiful moment of like there were some shots kind of where we could feel like the helicopter was above us or that we were in the helicopter, and we could like hear the stuff going on below us, and it just felt like, you know, there were some of those more cinematic opportunities that were carved out in this particular show.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you say that because and I think you're right. Docuseries have changed. I think
Yeah.
they've certainly evolved, and I think Tiger King is certainly the latest in the evolution of that of this as a format. And there is sort of a more cinematic quality. Why do you think these types of shows are kind of exploding the way they are right now?
Well, it's interesting. I can kind of give you my personal take. I really like shows like this as a consumer, just because it sheds light on like a slice of life that I would never be a part of. You know, like I like watching stuff about things that I just knew nothing about going into it. So I think that there's a curiosity out there now, with kind of living vicariously maybe through these stories, and obviously like the streaming services, like having them be so readily available on Netflix and Amazon and Hulu and things of that nature. um, I think it just like it sparked everyone's interest a little bit further, because you didn't have to work that hard now to like see an interesting documentary. You know, it can be right there in your home, and it turns out people have like a real interest for that. So
These are obviously these are your first two Emmy nominations.
yeah.
If I'm so what does that feel like when you what was that day like when you found out you got these nominations?
I was incredibly excited. I've sort of been in sound post production for about 7, maybe 8 years professionally, and um, you know, I've seen a lot of people, colleagues of mine, get nominated for things, and really it's just like the excitement of getting recognized for hard work. You know, the sound business is interesting because I always say, you know, if you've done a good job, nobody really notices your work. You know, the idea is that everything sort of sounds natural and right, and people don't think about sound as much. But that's why it was cool to be recognized for Tiger King, because it was a lot of hard work that we had put in, you know, my team, and and also it was one of those docu-series that sort of made space for creative sound, and it was something that at the end of the series, you know, when we had finished mixing it, I really had felt good about the work. So you know, to see so many people have watched it when it came out, and also to be recognized for it is just an exciting sort of moment for me. So
I have to imagine, you know, and you had brought up earlier that you know there are so many different sources of sound for this show because
yeah.
you have, you know, archival footage and you have news footage and things like that. What were some of the challenges of like of creating certain sounds? Did you have to create certain sounds for this, and what were some of the more challenging ones?
Well, it's certainly challenging when you're adding sound effects to something that, you know, sounds old. You know, if there's TV footage, or yeah, like there was some TV footage that was very like hissy and noisy, and sometimes the directors would want to add, you know, sound effects to that stuff. Well, if we add like a really pristine, well recorded sound effect into something that sounds lower quality, um, the audience will feel that shift. And so we often had to like match sound effects into archival footage where it would sound, you know, sort of cohesive with the quality of that archival footage. And certainly there's a lot of like cleanup that we do. We try to remove a lot of the extraneous noise and hiss and things like that that might come um, with the variety of footage that we were handed. But at the same time, you know, I think when it comes to docuseries, like you're trying to stay true uh, to what this stuff was when it actually happened. And so there was you know, and luckily the directors sort of embraced this idea too, that we were gonna, you know, if something was really gritty, like we're walking through the zoo with Joe Exotic, for example, and like we're hearing a lot of the people's footsteps and the camera crew moving around and that kind of stuff. That was sound that we stuck with and we loved it. You know, and that just, I think, added to the authenticity, and it helped us because we weren't trying to make everything this sort of polished, clean sound. We were able to embrace, you know, what the footage sounded like originally, and then carve sounds to match that stuff. So we didn't have to, like, you know, take everything to the same level. We would keep it true throughout.
I have to imagine that as you as you're getting this footage and you're starting to work on it,
Yeah.
you know, you're seeing it just like, you know, in a
Yeah.
different form, but still you're seeing it for the first time, like so many of us did. Did you
Right.
find yourself as you're working on this just going, "Wow, this story is amazing"?
Well, one of the interesting things is that we worked on the episodes out of order. So I think we worked on like episode 2 and then 3 and 4 and then went back to 1 and then did 6 and 7. So we actually had pieces of the story, but we hadn't sort of, you know, seen the resolution, or gotten the full arc of it just yet. But it's interesting that you bring it up because, like I said, this is the kind of stuff I really enjoyed watching, like on my own time. And so I was like trying to not watch the other episodes that had been turned over to us because I didn't want to reveal certain things. I kind of wanted to still be a viewer, and enjoy it as it unfolded. And so yeah, it was interesting. I had pieces of the puzzle when I started doing like episodes 2 and 3, and then, you know, a lot of stuff sort of made more sense once we rounded back to 1 and 6 and 7. And yeah, it was, you know, it was also one of these things that once we were approached, to do the work, and we had sort of like a sizzle reel of the, you know, what the show would shape up to be. And we just watched it and initially were like, this is going to be a big deal. And the interesting thing is, I think that, you know, the documentary certainly was helped by the fact that it aired right when everybody was kind of locked down in their homes. But we knew from the beginning that this was like something that people were really gonna want to watch and be really excited about, you know, despite any of those extra circumstances that helped out.
Mm, I want to talk about something that's been kind of in the sound world lately. The Motion Picture Academy decided recently to combine the
Yeah.
two sound categories, and it certainly elicited a lot of discussion uh,
Yeah.
in the film community. I wonder what is your take on that decision?
It's an interesting topic. You know, I'm not a member of the Academy. I'm not sort of in those conversations, which I imagine are deep and complex. But you know, the technology has made it so that, you know, a lot of people who are working on sound editing are also working on sound mixing. It isn't this, you know, strict divide, the way it historically was. Like, you know, historically a mixer would not have edited any of the material, and now it, you know, it can be worked on in the same software. So, you know, for those who got proficient editing, there was a sort of natural, um, progression to also, you know, be able to use your editing chops in, um, into a mixing format pretty easily without making too drastic of changes. But I think that there's something really gained when you kind of separate the editing and the mixing trades in your mind. So, you know, without speaking towards what awards should go where, I think that separating the work that you've done editorially from the overall sound mix usually lends itself to a more natural and instinctive sound mix. So, you know, with my colleagues that I work with on, you know, not just docuseries, but, you know, narrative films and all this other stuff, one thing we often try to do is, you know, we'll sort of decide, okay, Ian, you're gonna edit the dialogue, and someone else is gonna edit the effects, and then when, you know, if the crew is staffed in such a way that Ian and that other person are gonna be the mixers, we might swap roles, so that, like, you know, I'm then mixing the sound effects and my colleague is mixing the dialogue. And I've done this on a few projects if sort of the budgets and time, you know, and deadlines sort of call for it. And it has really worked because I think, you know, the mixer getting the opportunity to react to new material is something that really, you know, leads to, like what I was saying, like a really instinctive sound mix. You can kind of, you don't think of it as, oh, I put in all this hard work to get the dialogue right, and now I'm mixing the dialogue and I'm kind of tied to the work I've done or whatever. You can kind of just choose based on what's best for the film. And I think that that's what's always been like the mixer's biggest trait, like historically, is that they come in, they get to sort of watch the film and react instinctively to what it really needs. And so I think that, you know, like I said, the technology has blurred the line a little bit, but I think that the trade can still be sort of a separate piece of the puzzle. You know, once you go from sound editorial to sound mixing, there are ways to kind of separate those processes in your mind and still, you know, do what we've done historically, which is, you know, watch a film and decide what's best for it, and, you know, incorporate, you know, the director's vision and needs, and then we come up with some cool stuff. So
I love talking to folks like you, because I feel like I always learn so much about things I don't necessarily know about. Ian,
yeah,
congratulations on the Emmy nominations, and everybody go to goldderby.com, make your predictions for the Emmys, and stay tuned for more interviews with Emmy nominees throughout the season. Ian Cymore, congratulations. Thank you so much.
thank you, Tony. Great talking to you.